One of the most important elections in Israel's history and a national referendum on Benjamin Netanyahu. Israelis are casting their votes right now. The result could impact peace in the Middle East and appease Israelis scared of ongoing violence with the Palestinians. Will the highly polarizing right-wing Prime Minister be re-elected, or will the centre-right new kid on the block, Benny Gantz, get the nod? And have South African settlers there been voting? We now cross to Paula Slive, Newshound Media, who is monitoring the Israeli elections for us from Tel Aviv. How's it going, Paula? What's the turnout like?
Well, there's been a relatively good turnout. Traditionally, there are good turnouts here in Israel when there are polls. There is a significantly lower turnout, however, amongst the Arab Israeli population, which makes up around 20% of the voting public. And that's only seen about 51% turnout. So they're boycotting the elections because they believe it won't bring real change. But among the Israeli population, an important election that by and large will decide the future of Netanyahu.
Going back to the Israeli Palestinians or the Israeli Arabs, I mean, some of them are claiming that there are cameras on the voting booths. Is there any truth in that? That's
difficult to say. Difficult to say. The allegations that came forward was that there were around 120,000 cameras that were put up in specifically Arab neighborhoods here in Israel. Now, the Likud has admitted that this is accurate, but has said it was to create some kind of calm and prevent any kind of political interference. However, critics charge that it was an attempt at intimidation, that they wanted the word to get out in the Arab communities that they were being filmed, and in that way stop more people from coming forward, and that would result in less of a left-wing bloc coming forward. And that would be in Likud's interest. Likud, of course, being the party of incumbent Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is concerned that there could be a strong showing from the center to the left, and that would see his traditionally right-wing government perhaps unseated.
So clearly incredibly important elections for the Israelis. I mean, he's got quite a bit of support, doesn't he, particularly in the form of Donald Trump. But South Africa withdrew or downgraded relations with Israel. What sort of impact has that made there?
To be frank, it hasn't really made that much of an impact. Of course, you mentioned Donald Trump and the Israeli-American alliance. That's hugely important. And Netanyahu has been using his friendship with Trump as an important part of his election campaign. There are, however, a significant number of South Africans. They form part and parcel of the broader, what's called Anglo community. And there we're looking at around 200,000 who can vote. Now, when you're looking at a potential voting public of 6.3 million, that is really not a significant block, and only a small percentage of that is South Africans. So the South African voting public here, as well as what is happening vis-a-vis South Africa, Israel politically, when I talk to people on the streets, it's not really a major issue here for most Israelis, although Palestinians and Israeli Arabs certainly have welcomed the move.
Okay, Paula, thank you very much for that. Obviously going to be lots of hustling. Whoever wins, they've got to try and form a coalition government. Now, South Africa made a big mistake downgrading its relations with Israel. That's what Yossi Mechelberger, Senior Fellow at Chatham House Institute of International Affairs in London, told me. These elections, is it all about Netanyahu, corruption and, as always, security?
Well, I think was always the word security in Israel is almost mythological meaning. So it's always using the word security, which of course can mean so many different things. I don't have to tell the audience in South Africa that security can come more than anything else from coexistence rather than military and oppression, but also the corruption. I think Israel is fighting for its soul. It has a prime minister that pending hearing is basically indicted for some serious cases of bribery, of breach of trust and fraud. And the voters need really to think to themselves, this is the kind of leaders they would like for another 4 years and maybe beyond this. And I think it's a range of issue because in Israel also the attack on the Supreme Court or the freedom of the legal system. It's about racism towards the Arabs, about social justice. They are arranged there, but I think there are so many issues that today's election will determine future of the country.
And there's a real concern that if Netanyahu remains in power, that he could push a bill through, which means that he won't be touched by these charges against him, and that the country will lurch further to the right.
And this is a great fear, that if he can form a coalition, the next thing they will legislate what is known as the French law, which means as long as you are in an official position, you're not going to be indicted, and who knows, he might then proceed and become the president of Israel in 2-3 years when the current president retires. So it might be a case of 10 years until he might be able to put in front of a judge and to deal with very, very serious corruption allegations that undermine Israel democracy, freedom of speech, the media sector. And that's, in my mind, you know, the voters have a great opportunity to stop from happening, because if they don't, they might regret it for years to come.
Okay, and what's in the newcomer Gantz? I mean, what is he offering? He's also a military man. He's also all about security. He also believes in the settlements, which are illegal under international law. I mean, how much is likely to change under him?
Well, it's a good question, because the question is whether they say what they say because they want to win votes, or maybe that's what they really believe. The thing about Netanyahu, we know what he stands for, and we know his opportunism, and we know that he will do anything to stay in power. As far as Benny Gantz and the rest of his party, we know less. It's not going to be a sea change. They are not left. They are not, peaceniks, but they are pragmatic enough to try and pursue some arrangement with the Palestinians. Can a party, when out of the 4 leaders, 3 of them former chief of staff, really pursue peace that is based not only on security arrangements, but also deep understanding of coexistence and truth and reconciliation? I doubt it, but you know what, beggars can't be choosy, and I think in this sense, this will be a great improvement on so many levels.
What sort of support has Donald Trump given Netanyahu, and how will it play out in these elections, do you think?
I must admit, I can't remember such a flagrant intervention in the domestic affairs of another country, not an Israeli election, by a foreign leader, as Trump did in these elections. He just keep handing him presents that he thinks that will
handing over the Golan Heights to Israel and recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. That's what you're referring to, right?
Yes, and also not opposing Netanyahu's announcement the other day that he would annex Area C, which constitutes 60% of the West Bank, which is basically would be the last nail, if this coffin needs a last nail, of a 2-state solution. So this strong intervention in election in favor of one candidate, it's really put question whether Trump is a friend of Israel or a friend of very particular side of the political map in Israel.
South Africa recently downgraded its relations with Israel. What sort of impact does that gesture make? And do you think other countries might do something similar if they don't see the sort of change that they might want to see? Obviously keeping Israeli security at the top of their minds.
I don't think it will be followed by many countries. And I think in a world in which right-wing populism is ruling right now, Netanyahu is probably one of the leading populist and right-wing leaders. I would say, frankly, to South African and South African people, that downgrading is not usually the solution. And I understand where historically it comes from. I think actually a firm understanding, a firm criticism of Israel from South Africa without downgrading might have done a better trick here. It's sometimes all sort of implication of sanctions or boycotts don't always work, but Israel needs friends that will tell it exactly as it is, that if they want to stay friends, they need to make the right concession for peace. They can't keep Gaza under blockade, they can't build settlements, they can't even contemplate annexing Area C.
Still ahead, the South African Communist Party has crisscrossed the country campaigning for the ANC and is set to intensify its efforts in the last few weeks before the election. But is the party's support for the ANC a solid one?